On the topic of Max Fried, who reportedly they've had contract extensions with, they didn't go anywhere and they're no longer negotiating. They obviously can pick back up, but I want to bring up the scenario, the possibility. Is there any chance that if there is a gap in negotiations, they feel too wide that is not going to get closed before the end of next season, that they consider trading one of their faces of their franchise?
No, I don't see it. I don't see, you're going to have a bunch of people on Twitter. I'm sure you could come up here and say it too. And everything's going to start with if they can get this in return, if they can, do this, then they'll trade Max Fried. The fact is, none of what you're about to say, everything after the word if is not going to be realistic. He's got 1 year of team control left, and that year is much more valuable to the Braves pitching than it is for another team, especially what the Braves are going to get in return. A couple of prospects who could not realize their full potential. There's absolutely no scenario where I see the Braves trading Max Fried, not only because of the production he provides on the mound, on the field, but also just in terms of clubhouse presence, the chemistry on the team. The guy's been here as long as just about anybody. He's well respected in the locker room. And, to a certain extent, I know Charlie Morton is older than Max Fried, but Max Fried is the elder statesman of this pitching staff. I don't see any reality where the Braves move Max Fried this season.
Well, I think a lot of people would have said the same thing about Freddie Freeman a year before his free agency. I think everyone would have said it was like a 90% chance that he stays. Just hear me out. There's only one scenario that I see. The only thing that I can paint the picture of in my head, and it is, getting those prospects and immediately being able to flip them for a guy like Dylan Cease. And they would get a haul for Max Fried, probably more than the White Sox can get for Dylan Cease in 2 more years of control. So I think they'd get a haul for Max Fried. I think if they talk to other teams about what it would take, they could almost work like a 3-way trade where Max Fried goes somewhere, they get those prospects, they go to the White Sox, or they go to another team. I'm just using Cease as an example because we know he's available for trade. And then, you get 2 more years of control. Obviously, you're still probably dealing with the same situation 2 years down the line. How much do you think Dylan Cease is going to be a better pitcher than Max Fried next year? Do you think his 2 years are more valuable than 1 year of Fried? These are all things that you have to evaluate. I'm with you, though. Like, I don't think – but I do think, Alex Anthopoulos has been an aggressive GM. He's not been afraid to let guys walk like Dansby Swanson and Freddie Freeman. He's not been afraid to make big trades like sending William Contreras to Milwaukee, who had a very promising future ahead of him. So I do think those are conversations that are potentially being had that a lot of people want to just be like, oh, no way they do that. Well, those are conversations I think that need to be had. I'm not saying anything's going to come to fruition. I actually think it's highly unlikely. But there is that's really the only scenario. If they can get another frontline guy with more years of control to replace him in the rotation, that's the only scenario, only possibility. Because at the end of the day, you're right. What Max Fried brings to this rotation, with the rotation already being kind of in shoddy shape with him in there. Without him in there, it looks a lot worse. So it would have to be something where they swing an immediate trade this offseason to get someone with more years of control that maybe they feel a little more confident in, whether it be for playoff success or injury history.
I think that makes sense. And it was still the same thing that, if and then followed by a bunch of stuff that, it's a Fugazi, it's a Fugazi. And listen, I think that saying anything is impossible is not my vocabulary, but what you just outlined is so highly unlikely. It's worth exploring, but highly unlikely.
Well, I mean, highly unlikely. We did it last year with William Contreras and Sean Murphy and swung a 3-team deal. So, I mean, listen, yeah, I don't find it likely, but it is something that I think, everyone has to think about. I remember before this offseason, I mentioned him as a potential trade candidate just for that very reason. Now, listen, like you said, highly unlikely. If we're talking percentages like we did yesterday of things like this happening, I'm going less than 5%. I'm taking my chance with Max Fried, trying to win a World Series with him. If he leaves, he leaves. I also I think the Braves have money. If he has another good season, I still think there's a chance they extend him. If they like him, I think they have the money to make a deal like that, especially since we saw how they went after Aaron Nola. But impossible is not the word I would use, just very highly unlikely. And to be honest, it would make me sick whether he walks or gets traded, because Max Fried's one of my favorite players. He's a bulldog. He's a leader. I can't say enough good things. Coming up after the break, Alex Anthopoulos and Brian Snitker, they take the podium at the winter meetings. We're going to talk about some of the things they said.